Welcome to today's devotional message from Trusting God Always. You prayed, you fasted, you waited, and still, silence. Maybe this message is the sign you didn't know you needed. A gentle whisper in the quiet, reminding you that even when the world feels paused, faith is the quiet engine that keeps the soul moving forward. We all know this space, this place where the calendar pages turn, but the promise feels stagnant. This is where the heart asks its most vulnerable questions, where patience wears thin, and where the landscape of hope can feel barren. Before we step deeper into this sacred space of waiting, if these words meet you right where you are, like, share, and subscribe. It helps us reach more souls who need God's comfort and the steady assurance of His presence in every season. And we'd love for you to be part of this community. As we prepare our hearts, comment below with your favorite Bible promise, or the one you're still holding on to in the waiting. Sharing these anchors of truth can strengthen us all. Let's begin, and let His Word breathe new life into yours. You sit by the window, the rain a gentle drum against the pane, but the silence within feels deafening. It's a silence not of peace, but of unanswered questions and deferred hopes. You've poured out your soul in prayer, outlining your needs, voicing your deepest longings, holding on to the fragile threads of hope, and you have waited. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months, sometimes even years. Yet the answer, the breakthrough, the change you ache for, feels impossibly far off, like a distant shore you can only see through a thick fog. A deep weariness settles in, a heavy cloak that drapes over your spirit, whispering insidious questions. Doubts tap at the edges of your mind like the persistent rain. Is God still here? Does He see this pain, this struggle, this unmet need? When will anything happen to shift this unchanging landscape of my life? It's in these moments of unmet longing, in this silent room of waiting, that the heart feels most vulnerable. This is where faith isn't a triumphant shout on a mountaintop, but a quiet, sometimes trembling, breath held in the valley. You wrestle with the stark reality of a faith that often requires patience beyond your natural understanding. A stillness of spirit when every fiber of your being wants to rush forward or turn back. The waiting isn't passive. It's an active posture of leaning, of wrestling, sometimes of simply enduring. It feels like traversing a wilderness, dry and parched, scanning the horizon for signs of water, for a glimpse of the promised land. Like the disciples in the storm, the waves of uncertainty crash against the boat of your faith, and the question echoes, "Master, carest thou not that we perish?" Yet even in this storm, even in this silent wilderness, you are not alone. This space of waiting isn't empty, it's profoundly full. It's full of unseen growth, of roots deepening into the fertile soil of God's character, of lessons learned in humility and dependence. It's where faith is most profoundly tested, yes, but paradoxically, it's where it is most deeply rooted, becoming resilient and unbreakable. The silence isn't absence, it's preparation. Perhaps God is not saying no, but not yet, or even not like this, but like this. He is working behind the veil of the visible, shaping the circumstances, refining your character, preparing you for what is to come. It's a process as slow and deliberate as a seed germinating in the dark earth. You cannot see the progress, but life is stirring beneath the surface. This message is woven from the heart of those who wait, a gentle reminder that even in the deepest quiet, God is irrevocably present. He is at work, weaving His purposes through the fabric of your days. And this season, this silent room, is part of His perfect, though often mysterious, plan for you. He is the author, and your story, even in this chapter of stillness, is unfolding according to His design. Your faith is not measured by the speed of the answer, but by the steadfastness of your trust in the author who holds the pen. You remember the fervent prayers, the tears shed, the earnest pleas laid bare before God. You had faith, believing He would move mountains. But the mountain remains. The diagnosis hasn't changed. The relationship is still broken. The silence from heaven echoes back like a cruel, empty chamber. You sit on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, wondering if your whispered anguish even registered beyond the four walls of your room. It's in these moments that doubt, like a cold wind, begins to chip away at the foundation of trust. You question the power of prayer itself. Was it just wishful thinking? You question the sincerity of your own faith. Was it not enough? And most painfully, you question God's willingness to intervene, to step into your storm when His deliverance feels conspicuously absent. This feeling of being unheard, of your deepest cries dissolving into thin air, can be profoundly isolating. This struggle is not new. It is as ancient as faith itself, woven into the very fabric of Scripture. Think of the psalmists crying out, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever?" Psalm 13:1. Think of the prophets pleading for God to rend the heavens and come down. They knew this ache, this waiting in the wilderness, where the promised land felt impossibly far off. They poured out their hearts, not always met with immediate rescue, but often with a quiet, persistent presence in the waiting. Scripture reveals a God who does hear every prayer. Not a single tear falls unnoticed. Not a single whispered plea is lost in the cosmos. The challenging truth is that His response isn't always a resounding yes delivered on our desired timeline or in our expected package. Sometimes the answer is a quiet strength to endure the storm rather than its immediate cessation. Sometimes the mountain doesn't move because God intends for you to learn to climb it, revealing muscles of faith you never knew you had. This difficult season of unanswered expectation isn't a sign of God's absence or indifference. It is often an invitation, a difficult, painful one, to look beyond the immediate lack of change. It's an invitation to consider the possibility that God is answering, just not in the way or time you expected. Perhaps He is preparing you for what's next. A greater work, a deeper capacity to receive, a resilience forged in the fire of waiting. Perhaps the silence isn't emptiness, but the quiet before a different kind of move, a move designed not just for your comfort, but for your ultimate good and His greater glory. She kneels again tonight, not because the situation has changed, but because hope, though bruised, refuses to die completely. She breathes a prayer, not demanding action, but seeking presence. In the quiet of the room, the silence is still there, but now perhaps it feels less like absence and more like a space holding something unseen, something holy, something waiting to be understood, not with the mind, but with a trusting heart. This difficult waiting is where faith learns its deepest lessons, that God is faithful, not just when He delivers, but also while we wait for the dawn. The quiet ache settles in the pit of your stomach, the stalled career, the unresolved conflict that weighs you down, the persistent illness that refuses to yield, the hollow echo of a longing for connection that remains unmet. This is what you see, what you feel, what you carry day after day. It is the visible surface of your life, a landscape that feels barren or broken. But what you don't see is the invisible, profound work God is doing beneath the surface. Think of the mighty oak tree enduring a long, hard drought. Above the ground, its branches may seem parched, its growth slowed, perhaps even stopped. But hidden from sight, deep within the earth, its roots are driving down with relentless persistence, stretching wider and deeper, anchoring themselves more firmly, searching for life-giving water held in unseen reserves. This hidden work is not just maintenance, it is essential preparation, unseen strengthening that ensures stability and allows for future towering growth when the rains finally come. Your human perspective is limited to what your eyes can behold in the immediate moment. The lack, the delay, the visible struggle. God's perspective encompasses the eternal landscape of your soul, the timeless processes necessary for your ultimate good and His glory. The weight you feel isn't merely the burden of the problem itself, it's the tension of living by sight in a world that constantly demands proof and progress, while being called to walk by faith, believing in what cannot be seen. Hebrews 11:1. This tension, this uncomfortable space between what is visible and what is believed, is not a sign of God's neglect. It is fertile ground, meticulously prepared for spiritual growth. It is the wilderness where your soul learns dependence, not by force, but by surrender. It urges you to release your grip on control, to trust the master gardener who sees the unseen soil of your heart and knows exactly what it needs to flourish, even if it feels like a long, barren season right now. What if the waiting isn't evidence of God's inactivity in your life, but rather proof of His detailed, careful work happening in the hidden places you cannot yet perceive? What if the surrender you feel powerless to offer is actually the strength God is cultivating within you? This season of unseen work confronts your deepest fears, the anxiety that nothing is happening, the doubt that your prayers are lost in the ether, the fear of permanent stagnation or irrecoverable loss. But God's quiet, hidden labor is His faithful response to those fears, building resilience you didn't know you had, deepening roots of faith that will hold you steady, and preparing you for a season of fruitfulness you cannot now imagine. Don't despise this hidden season. Trust the gardener who works in the dark. Lean into the tension not just as a burden, but as a holy invitation to surrender your need to see the end, and simply trust the author of your unseen story. You look at the calendar again. Another month gone. Still no answer, still no movement. The promise feels distant, a whisper lost in the wind of waiting. You've sown the seeds of faith, watered them with tears, perhaps even built little fences of hope around them. But the ground remains stubbornly dry. Has God forgotten? Does He hear? Or was the promise simply a mirage, a cruel trick played by a hopeful heart? This feeling, this gnawing doubt in the long silence, is a wilderness many have walked, a landscape etched deeply into the human spirit that longs for clarity and control. Step back thousands of years, across sun-baked plains and star-dusted nights, to a man named Abram. God speaks a word, a breathtaking promise. Look toward heaven and number the stars if you are able to number them. And then, the impossible. So shall your offspring be. A nation, countless descendants, born from him. But Abram is old. His wife Sarai is past the age of bearing children. The promise lands not just on fertile ground, but on the parched earth of human limitation, a seed dropped onto stone. He believed. Scripture tells us his faith was counted as righteousness. But believing a promise doesn't erase the struggle of waiting for it, especially when the years stack up like stones in a dry riverbed. A decade passes, 2 decades. You can almost hear the silence in their tents, the murmurs of when, how. Surely God meant soon. The human heart, impatient architect of its own destiny, starts to fidget. It sees the problem, no heir, and seeks a solution. Sarai suggests Hagar, her servant. Abram agrees, a decision born not of malice, but of weary doubt, of trying to help God out, to give the divine clock a human hand. Ishmael is born, a son, a fulfillment, yes, but one born of human strategy, not divine timing. And like a crack in a foundation, this well-intentioned detour creates complications that echo through generations. But God didn't abandon the original promise. He didn't forget. He simply waited. And Abraham, now Abraham, continued to wait too. Another 13 years drift by after Ishmael's birth, before God speaks again, reaffirming the promise, setting a time, about this time next year. And then, the name change, the covenant sealed. God was working in the unseen, in the quiet aging of bodies, preparing for a moment that would require not human strength, but divine power alone. He was waiting for the impossible to become undeniable proof of his sovereignty. Think about this. Abraham waited decades for the promised son. His faith wasn't a single event, but a long, unfolding journey of trust, punctured by moments of doubt and human frailty, yet ultimately grounded in God's unwavering faithfulness. The story isn't just about the miracle of Isaac's birth. It's about the miracle of faith that endured the long, stretching years before Isaac. It shows us that God's timeline is rarely our own, and that the waiting room isn't an empty void, but often a classroom where trust is deepened and refined. The wilderness years are not wasted years in God's economy. They are seasons of hidden growth, where roots run deeper and character is forged in the quiet heat of patience. Maybe you are in your own long wait right now. Maybe you've tried to help God, to force an outcome, only to find it brought more complication than peace. Abraham's story reminds us that faith isn't about demanding God act on our schedule, but about trusting His process, even when it feels agonizingly slow, even when it takes you through places you never wanted to go. God's word is reliable, yes, but His timing is perfect, requiring a surrender of control we often resist. He wasn't late for Abraham. He was preparing something only He could do, at a moment that would leave no doubt as to the source of the miracle. He is doing the same for you. The silence isn't absence. It's often the sound of God working in ways you cannot yet perceive. Can you trust the process, not just yearn for the outcome? Can you find peace in the unfolding, even when the next chapter remains unseen? It's in the quiet moments, the surrendered moments, that faith truly takes flight, soaring not on the wings of certainty, but on the steady current of His unchanging promise. You sit in the silence, surrounded by walls you didn't build, but now confine you. Maybe it's a season of waiting that feels like a life sentence, a place where dreams are muffled by stone and shadow. Just like Joseph, the favored son, whose vibrant prophetic dreams ended not on a throne, but in a pit, then a prison. Betrayed by his own blood, sold into the crushing anonymity of slavery, his path veered violently off course. You picture him there, day after day, in the echoing darkness, the scent of despair thick in the air. Falsely accused, stripped of his freedom, forgotten even by the one man he helped escape. The years bled into each other, a cruel mockery of the bright future God had once painted for him. Innocence offered no key. Hope seemed like a distant echo in the courtyard outside. This prison wasn't just a physical space. It was a prison of injustice, of broken promises, of a future seemingly derailed. You wonder if God remembers you in your own confined space. Just as Joseph must have wondered if anyone outside the walls still spoke his name. Yet the whispers of Scripture echo with stubborn truth. But the Lord was with Joseph. Even in the lowest dungeon, God's presence wasn't absent. It was there, a quiet, anchoring strength in the solitude. The skills Joseph learned within those stone walls, learning patience, not just with time, but with people, developing wisdom in managing difficult circumstances, cultivating discernment, maintaining integrity, even when nobody was watching. These were not wasted years. They were the unlikely apprenticeship for managing an entire nation's storehouses during famine, for interacting with complex political figures, for holding immense power with humility and grace. The crushing weight of injustice wasn't merely pain. It was a crucible refining his character like precious metal, stripping away youthful arrogance, building unwavering resilience, teaching profound reliance on God alone. The waiting wasn't a cosmic delay of destiny. It was the necessary incubation period, a divine pause where God built the inner fortitude needed for the external assignment. God doesn't waste your wilderness seasons. He prepares you in them. He doesn't ignore your prison. He equips you through it. The confinement wasn't an end to the story. It was the unlikely, painful catalyst for unprecedented expansion. Your deepest valley might be the very place God is sculpting you, teaching you lessons no mountaintop could offer, and equipping you with the very skills and character you will need for the abundant future He has planned. The darkness wasn't abandonment. It was the essential backdrop against which faith learned to glow brightest, a hidden season turning into a holy story. Can you trust the process, even when the walls seem permanent? Can you trust the God who promises to walk into the cell with you? He remembers your name. The sand stretches out, endless and shifting, under a sky that offers relentless sun by day and often chilling wind by night. You feel the grit on your skin, taste the dust in your mouth. It's a place of waiting, yes, a vast emptiness between where you were and where you long to be. This is the wilderness, and for a whole generation, it became their schoolroom. Imagine them, the Israelites, fresh out of the unimaginable chains of Egypt, standing at the edge of a journey meant to be measured in days or weeks. Freedom was theirs, a miracle of parting waters and fallen chariots behind them. But ahead, 40 years of wandering. This wasn't some cosmic detour or divine punishment for the sake of suffering. No, this wilderness was God's intentional classroom, a place designed to strip away the ingrained habits of slavery, the dependence on Pharaoh, the limited vision of captive people. They faced hunger that gnawed at their bellies, a thirst that parched their throats under the blazing sun. Enemies lurked in the shadows, reminding them just how vulnerable they were. Every single challenge was a syllabus for a single crucial lesson: daily dependence on God. He taught them to look up for their breakfast, sending manna like dew from heaven each morning, just enough for today. A powerful, tangible lesson against hoarding and anxiety. He taught them to cry out when the water skins were empty, bringing streams from solid rock, a miracle flowing from impossibility. He sheltered them, guided them, made his presence undeniably visible, a pillar of cloud by day, a pillar of fire by night, a constant, moving testament that he was with them, leading the way through the trackless waste. But the wilderness also exposed their own hearts. The slave mentality died hard. They grumbled, they complained, they longed for the familiar, even the bondage of Egypt when the going got tough. They let fear paralyze them at the border of the promised land, choosing unbelief over the promise of abundance. This generation had to die in the wilderness, not because God was cruel, but because a spirit of slavery cannot inherit the promises of freedom. God used the long, hard wait to purify, to build character, to instill faith in a new generation who knew only His provision and guidance in the wild. Perhaps you find yourself in a wilderness season right now. Maybe it's a long wait for a prayer to be answered, a difficult transition, a season of loss that feels barren and isolating. The path forward isn't clear. The daily needs feel overwhelming. It's easy to feel forgotten, like you're just wandering. But what if this empty space is God's appointed schoolroom for you? What if the waiting isn't arbitrary delay, but necessary preparation? He's not just withholding, He's building. He's stripping away old dependencies, old fears, old ways of seeing that wouldn't serve you in the promised land He has for you. He's teaching you a deeper dependence, revealing His faithfulness, not in grand, instantaneous rescues, but in the quiet, daily miracle of manna, in the unexpected stream from a rock. This wilderness season, however painful, is meant to purify your faith and build the character you need for the next step, the next calling, the next blessing. Can you see His pillar of cloud today? Can you trust that He is leading, even when the path is unclear and the landscape is bare? He is. And He is using this time, this emptiness, to forge something strong and true within you. The dust coats your skin, the air is thin, and the silence of the cave presses in. Outside, the man who hates you hunts, his breath hot on your trail. You've been chosen, set apart, marked for greatness, yet your reality is the cold, damp rock wall behind you. It feels like a cruel joke the universe is playing. Anointed king, reduced to hiding like a criminal. This is the cave David knew. Imagine the weight of it. You, a shepherd boy with a heart attuned to God, suddenly elevated, anointed with oil, filled with the Spirit, promised a throne. The scent of that sacred oil still lingers, a reminder of God's powerful call. But the path to the palace isn't paved. It's a rocky, treacherous wilderness, full of ambush and betrayal. King Saul, once your mentor, now your relentless enemy, driven mad by jealousy and fear. He wants you dead, and so you run. Years blur into a relentless chase. You learn the contours of the desert, the secret springs, the hidden crevices where a man can disappear. Your companions are outcasts, men in distress, debt, or discontent, an unlikely band of brothers forging loyalty in hardship. Every rustle of leaves, every distant sound of horns sends a jolt of fear through your body. Is this it? Are they here? You are the king in waiting, living a life of constant threat, marked by fear, loss, and bone-deep uncertainty. Perhaps you understand that feeling. Maybe you haven't been literally hunted, but you felt pursued by anxiety, chased by deadlines, cornered by circumstances you can't control. You feel the weight of expectation, the promise of something more, yet you are trapped in a waiting season that feels endless and dangerous. You were promised a victory, a breakthrough, a healing, but you are still hiding in your own kind of cave, perhaps a cave of financial strain, a cave of relational brokenness, a cave of unanswered prayers. The world outside sees your struggle, maybe even judges your position, unaware of the divine promise whispered over your life. David had chances. Oh, he had chances to end the chase, to shorten the waiting, to seize the throne with his own hand. Twice, Saul was delivered into his power in the cave, asleep, vulnerable. His men urged him, "This is your moment. God has given you your enemy." The logic was simple, the path clear, the outcome immediate. One swift strike. And the suffering ends. The waiting is over. The promise is claimed. But David refused. He refused to force God's timing, to defile God's anointed. He chose restraint over revenge, patience over precipice. It wasn't just about Saul. It was about trust. Trust that God, who had anointed him, would bring him to the throne in his way and in his time. This quiet refusal, this radical act of faith in the face of immense pressure, was part of the divine curriculum of the cave. The cave wasn't just a hiding place, it was a training ground. It was a place where strength wasn't about physical power, but about inner fortitude forged in the crucible of dependence. It was where David learned to lean on God with everything he had, pouring out his fear, his anger, his confusion, and his unwavering hope in the Psalms that still echo through time. He found freedom in the confinement, a strange peace amidst the pursuit. The wilderness was refining him, stripping away self-reliance, teaching him to listen for the whisper of God above the howling wind and the pounding of his own fearful heart. The waiting, though agonizing, was integral to the preparation. You don't become a king after God's own heart in the comfort of a palace, but in the brutal, beautiful shaping of the wilderness cave. Your current season of waiting, no matter how dark or uncertain, is not a season God forgot you. It is the cave where character is forged, where radical dependence is learned, where your faith isn't just professed in sunshine, but proven in shadow. It's where God is shaping you for the very purpose He has called you to. He is not asking you to conquer your fears in your own strength, but to surrender them in faith. Your greatest weakness might just become the canvas for His greatest strength. The place you feel most trapped might be the very place God is preparing your breakthrough. He sees you, hiding in plain sight, marked by His promise, and He is faithful to finish what He started. Trust the process. Trust the timing. Trust the hand that guides you even in the dark. You sit in the quiet space of expectation, or perhaps quiet desperation. The world outside moves on. Traffic flows, seasons change, others seem to receive their breakthroughs, and you are still here, still waiting. You've held on to the promise, whispered the prayer, tried to cultivate patience, but the silence persists. A heavy quiet that presses in, making you wonder if you misheard, if you weren't worthy, if God has simply forgotten. This waiting isn't passive. It's an active ache, a subtle erosion of resolve day by day. It's the moment the mind begins to race, filling the void with worries. What if it never happens? What if I waited for nothing? It feels less like rest and more like resistance. Just as a physical muscle strengthens not through comfort, but through the tension of resistance, your spiritual muscle, that core of faith, patience, and unwavering endurance, develops its true power in the waiting seasons. It's easy to trust God when the path is clear, when momentum is building, when prayers receive swift and visible answers. The real forging, the deep, resilient trust that withstands any storm, happens when you must stand firm, hold on to faith, and believe in the unseen in the face of prolonged uncertainty, unanswered questions, and apparent inactivity. This is the wilderness where shallow belief finds its limits and where a robust, fire-tested trust is born. The discomfort isn't a sign that something is wrong with you or with God's plan. It's often the very sign that profound, internal work is unfolding. God isn't primarily concerned with your immediate comfort in the waiting. He is deeply invested in your character. He is using this season to build within you the strength to carry the weight of the very promises He will eventually fulfill, the wisdom to steward the blessings He has in store, the steadfastness that doesn't crumble under pressure. The seed doesn't sprout the moment it hits the soil. It waits in darkness, drawing strength from the unseen. The roots grow deep before the shoot breaks the surface. Embrace this tension. See the waiting not as a void or a punishment, but as the crucible where strength is forged, where your faith is not just professed, but proven, where the truest spiritual muscle is built, fiber by fiber, in the unwavering belief that the one who promised is faithful, even when all you see is the long road stretching ahead. Maybe you feel weak in the waiting, but God sees the strength being knit within your soul. Maybe you feel forgotten, but you are simply being prepared. Lean into the paradox. The fastest growth happens when you are moving the slowest, waiting on Him. He is building you, brick by quiet brick, for what's next. Don't despise the waiting. It is building you. Allow yourself to feel the tension and trust the trainer. The heat presses in. It's not a sudden blaze, but a slow, intense pressure that leaves you breathless, questioning if you can endure another moment. You feel exposed, raw, the layers you built for protection crumbling away. This isn't the grand mountain peak you pictured on your faith journey. It feels more like the crucible floor, a fiery pit where everything you thought was solid begins to melt. You wonder what purpose this serves, this relentless fire that seems determined to burn away everything you are. Think of the refiner and his gold. Before it gleams, before it becomes something truly precious and valuable, it must face the fire. Not a gentle warmth, but intense, scorching heat. This heat isn't meant to destroy the gold itself, but to attack the impurities clinging to it, the dross, the sediment, the things that diminish its purity and worth. Your season of waiting, your unexpected trial, the silence where you longed for a voice, it can feel exactly like this fire. It brings to the surface the hidden dross in your soul, the impatience that chafes against God's timing, the need for control that fights against surrender, the tendrils of doubt that wrap around your hope, the subtle ways you've placed your trust in circumstances or people rather than solely in Him. These are the impurities that the pressure reveals. It hurts. It's uncomfortable. It contradicts everything you thought a blessed life should feel like. You ask, why me? What did I do wrong to deserve this heat? But this process isn't a punishment. It is purification. It's a holy refinement designed not to break you, but to make you unbreakable. The fire exposes what isn't truly gold, the things that prevent you from fully reflecting the glorious image God intended for you. It burns away the fear that hides behind a facade of strength, the anxiety rooted in self-reliance, the tendency to drift from His promises when the path gets steep. What feels like falling apart is God carefully taking apart the flawed to rebuild the flawless. This refiner knows the exact temperature needed. He knows the precise duration required for the dross to be separated from the gold. He sits by the crucible, his gaze steady, never leaving the process unsupervised. He won't let the fire consume you. He will only let it consume what hinders you. What if the deepest peace is found not in escaping the fire, but in trusting the refiner in the fire? What if the greatest strength emerges not from avoiding weakness, but from allowing God to be strong where you are weakest? As you endure the heat of this waiting or trial, trust that the master craftsman is at work. He sees the hidden impurities, the potential for radiance. He is patient, purposeful, and perfect in His process. You are not being consumed by the flames. You are being prepared to shine. You are coming forth not just changed, but transformed. A vessel of pure gold, stronger, more resilient, and more radiant than you could have imagined before the fire began. The calendar page mocks you. Another week gone. Another milestone missed according to the intricate map you drew for your life. You charted the course, marked the destinations, even calculated the arrival times. But life, as it often does, has diverged wildly from your planned route. Anxiety whispers its familiar lie. You're falling behind. Something is wrong. This world screams for speed, celebrates efficiency, demands instant gratification. It's a world where waiting feels like failure, like being forgotten on a stalled train while others zoom past. You feel the tension tightening in your chest, the frantic urge to do something, to push, to force the hands of the cosmic clock to align with your schedule. But the waiting, this unbidden pause, is not empty space. It is a sacred season, often a divine invitation, or sometimes a forceful push to release your grip on the steering wheel and surrender your carefully constructed timeline. It's the wilderness calling you away from the well-trodden paths you designed, asking you to trust the one who knows the way through untamed territory. Surrendering your timeline isn't a sigh of passive resignation. It's a shout of active faith. It's declaring, in the face of all you don't understand, that God's plan is not just different from yours. It is profoundly, infinitely better. His timing is not just right. It is precisely, perfectly appointed. This act of letting go is perhaps the most challenging part of the waiting journey. Yet paradoxically, it is also the most freeing. You release the heavy burden of trying to manipulate circumstances, to orchestrate outcomes through sheer willpower or frantic effort. You stop trying to make the mustard seed sprout overnight just because you planted it. Instead, you learn to rest in the sovereign power of a God who holds every moment in His hands. He is never late, never early, but moves with a divine rhythm that transcends our limited perception. This surrender doesn't mean you stop acting when He calls, but you stop forcing when He waits. It builds a foundation of peace deep within your soul, a quiet confidence that the world cannot understand, because it is rooted not in the shifting sands of circumstance, but in the unchanging truth of the controller of all circumstances. You give up control only to gain connection. You abandon your small plan to step into His magnificent story. You watch the horizon, eyes fixed on the dawn you believe holds your future. You've built whole narratives around that moment. The job offer, the healing, the reconciliation, the breakthrough. Until then, life feels like a paused movie, a practice run. You tell yourself you'll really live, truly find joy, finally serve God with abandon, once the thing arrives. The waiting isn't just an inconvenience. It feels like an invisible cage, preventing your story from beginning. This is the subtle danger of becoming so focused on the future outcome. You risk missing the grace already poured out, available, here, now, in this very breath. True faith, deep faith, learns a different kind of contentment. It's not just the relief that washes over you after the wait ends, when the mountain is climbed and the valley is behind you. It is the peace that settles in the waiting, while you're still wandering the wilderness, while the storm still rages. It's a paradoxical peace, a quiet strength that whispers, even here, even now, He is enough. This contentment isn't a surrender to inaction or a dismissal of longing. It's a profound recognition that satisfaction and peace are found not in external circumstances, but in the unwavering presence of God Himself. His face is the true destination, not the future outcome. Imagine the manna in the wilderness, enough only for today. No hoarding, no worrying about tomorrow. Just a daily, miraculous provision. That's the grace available in the present moment. His grace is sufficient for this day, for this hour, for this specific challenge you face right now. The anxiety about tomorrow's unknown loses its grip when you anchor your soul in the certain knowledge of His presence today. There are blessings hidden in the dust of the waiting, lessons etched into the silence, opportunities for radical trust and profound worship woven into the fabric of this very moment. Don't just hope for God to appear in the future destination. Learn to find Him walking beside you on the road, in the quiet rhythm of your steps, in the gentle tapping of the wind at your window. He is here, He is now, and that is more than enough. Look around you, right where you are. What small grace can you acknowledge? What quiet whisper of His presence can you discern? What act of trust, however tiny, can you offer right now, not for the sake of the future, but simply because He is here, in the present moment, waiting for you to meet Him there? This is the sacred work of the wait, learning to find Him in the now. The silence presses in, thick and heavy like the tombstone rolled across the entrance. You sit with the unanswered prayer, the persistent ache, the fear that whispers maybe you're forgotten, maybe this pain is meaningless. The waiting feels endless, a barren wilderness stretching out under a sky that seems indifferent. You've asked the question 1,000 times, the unspoken plea echoing in the chambers of your heart. Why me? Why this suffering? Why this delay? Every day feels like a step further into the valley, and the mountain of hope seems impossibly far away. The oil in your lamp is running low, and darkness feels closer than dawn. This isn't the journey you planned. It feels like a detour, a punishment, a sign that something has gone terribly wrong. But look closely, not just at your own weary feet, but at the path before you. It is not a new path. It is a path worn by the steps of the one who understands the deepest human suffering, the one who knew waiting not just in moments, but in profound seasons. Jesus himself walked this valley. He waited in the Garden of Gethsemane, praying for the hour to pass, wrestling with a weight far heavier than our own, surrendering his will to the Father's perfect, terrifying plan. He waited in agonizing silence before Pilate, the King of Kings standing trial before a mere man, choosing stillness over defense, embracing the path of apparent defeat. And then the ultimate wait, 3 days in the tomb, a season of profound waiting, of human uncertainty, of a silence so deep it felt like God had abandoned his Son. From a human perspective, it was delay. It was suffering that looked undeniably like defeat. The stone was rolled, hope seemed buried, and all the promises seemed broken. Yet it was in that sacred waiting, in that profound suffering, that God was doing his deepest work. When you find yourself in a season of difficult waiting, of inexplicable pain, you are not walking a strange or unique path. You are walking a path that Jesus himself trod. This is the truth that can shatter the why me and replace it with a breathtaking realization. I am identifying with Christ. Your waiting isn't meaningless cosmic happenstance. It is a profound connection to the Savior who understands delay, who knows the ache of pain, who bore the crushing weight of the silence of God. This shift in perspective isn't theoretical, it's transformative. The wilderness becomes a sanctuary where you meet the God who walked through his own. The silence isn't emptiness, it's a shared quietness with the one who stood silent before his accusers. The suffering isn't pointless. It's an invitation to experience fellowship in his sufferings, as Paul writes in Philippians 3:10, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection, and may share his sufferings, becoming like him in his death. This doesn't glorify pain itself, but the holy purpose woven through it. It's a paradox. In the depths of your weakness, you are made strong by his presence. In the moment of feeling most abandoned, you are walking in the closest intimacy with the one who cried, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Your pain becomes a thin veil separating you from the heart of the suffering Savior. Like a seed waiting in the dark earth, unaware of the sunlight it will soon embrace, you are in a hidden season, but one God is using for divine growth. Jesus trusted, even unto death, that the Father's will was perfect, even when it led through hardship and the grave. He knew the resurrection waited on the other side of the tomb. Can you trust, even now, in the goodness of the Father's will for you? Can you believe that this hardship, this valley, this season of waiting is part of a larger, more glorious story he is writing? It's not about finding joy in the pain, but finding Jesus in the pain. It's trusting that the one who endured the cross for the joy set before him is with you in your struggle, teaching you to trust him moment by moment. This deeper connection to Christ doesn't erase the waiting or the pain, but it transforms it from a crushing burden into a sacred path, trod with nail-scarred feet just ahead of yours, guiding you toward a resurrection morning you cannot yet see. Take a breath. Look at the path again. You are not alone. You are walking with the King. Your suffering is not a sign of God's absence, but an invitation into his deepest presence. It is a call to know him, not just in the mountaintop victories, but in the profound, quiet fellowship of the valley. You feel it churning inside, the relentless anxiety of waiting. The storm isn't just outside. It rages in the quiet spaces of your mind. Your heart is a ship tossed on a sea of uncertainty, battered by waves of what if and currents of doubt. Circumstances shift like sand beneath your feet, and the ground you thought was solid feels unstable. You sit, maybe staring at a wall, maybe pacing the floor, the silence amplifying the loud voice of fear that whispers, "Will this ever change? Is God even there?" This is the wilderness of waiting, the valley of the shadow of uncertainty. But listen, in the heart of this tempest, when your emotional compass spins wildly and your thoughts race like wind-driven clouds, there is an anchor. God's promises, breathed into Scripture, are not fragile ropes, but unbreakable chains linked to the bedrock of eternity. While the world around you may feel utterly unpredictable, God's character and His Word stand as an eternal, unwavering lighthouse. He is faithful, always. He is good, even when goodness feels far away. He has a plan, a tapestry woven with threads you cannot yet see. Jeremiah 29:11. He works all things, yes, even this, for the ultimate good of those who love Him. Romans 8:28. He began a good work in you, and He will carry it on to completion. Philippians 1:6. And this promise, like a constant sunrise, burns bright. He will never leave you, never forsake you, not even for a moment in the darkest night. Hebrews 13:5. To anchor your soul in this storm, you must deliberately fill your mind and heart with these luminous truths. Open the Psalms and let the raw cries and soaring praises resonate within you. Seek out passages that speak of God's magnificent sovereignty and His relentless love. Read them again. Let the words wash over the turbulence within. And then speak them out loud. Remind yourself of God's track record throughout history: the Red Sea parted, the walls of Jericho fallen, the resurrection morning, and recount His faithfulness in the quiet victories and unexpected mercies of your own life. This act of speaking, of remembering, is like wrapping your hands around that anchor chain, pulling it tight, reinforcing the truth against the onslaught of despair. Your hope is not a flimsy raft drifting on the changing winds of circumstance. It is firmly anchored to the unchanging, immovable rock of His Word. Here, in this truth, is where your soul finds its steady rest, even when the storm still rages. You sit in the silence, the weight of unspoken prayers pressing down. Another morning arrives, and the circumstances you've begged God to change remain stubbornly the same. You've poured out your heart, laid bare your deepest longings, brought your fears and questions before Him again and again. Yet the heavens feel like brass, the response a deafening quiet. It's easy now, isn't it? Easy to let the words feel hollow, to let the motivation wane, to succumb to the gnawing discouragement that whispers, "What's the point? Why keep knocking on a door that seems bolted shut? Why keep speaking into the wind when no reply echoes back?" This waiting season, this arid stretch where hope feels like a mirage, is precisely the crucible where the truest, most potent form of prayer is forged: persistent prayer. It's the act of kneeling when your knees feel weak, speaking when your voice feels thin, and believing when doubt coils around your heart like a desert serpent. Jesus knew this struggle. He told a story, etched into the fabric of time, about a widow who wouldn't give up. She had a righteous cause, a need for justice, and an adversary who wouldn't relent. And she had an unjust judge who didn't fear God or care about people. But she kept coming. She kept knocking, not because she was entitled, but because she was persistent. Luke 18 tells us she wore Him down. not with power or influence, but with sheer, unwavering asking. Jesus' point? If an unjust judge will eventually yield to persistence, how much more will your loving, righteous, Heavenly Father hear and respond to the cries of His children who don't give up? But here is where the paradox begins to breathe. Sometimes, the silence is God's loudest invitation. Prayer isn't just a divine vending machine where you insert requests and receive outcomes. Its purpose runs deeper than acquiring what you want, as crucial as your needs are to His heart. Prayer is the lifeline that keeps you tethered to God in the storm. It's the constant turning of your gaze towards the light when the shadows threaten to consume you. It's the humble declaration, whispered or shouted, "I cannot do this without you." It's about staying connected, moment by moment, breath by breath, request by request, aligning your restless, anxious heart with His unwavering, sovereign will. It's an act of profound dependence. So keep bringing it all before Him. Don't edit your prayers. Bring the raw longing, the sharp edges of your fear, the confusion gnawing in your gut, the painful questions that keep you awake at night. Pour it all out like water from a broken vessel. Even if the circumstances outside your window remain stubbornly fixed, unyielding to your pleas, prayer changes you. This is the deeper work. The seemingly unanswered prayer is doing something vital within you. It is strengthening your resolve, annealing your spirit in the fire of waiting. It is clarifying your heart's true desires, separating fleeting wants from foundational needs. It keeps your focus, not on the mountain blocking your path, but on the one who can move mountains, or grant you strength to climb them, or even lead you around them through a path unseen. Sometimes, the wilderness journey is not about reaching the promised land quickly, but about learning to walk with God in the wilderness. And you are not meant to walk this wilderness alone. In the waiting, there is profound power in shared faith. Share your burden, your story, your persistent prayer with faithful friends, with brothers and sisters who understand the language of hopeful waiting. Ask them to pray with you, to lift your specific need before the throne when your own strength falters. There is a collective power in faith lifted up, a synergy that multiplies hope and reinforces courage during the long watch. Don't let the enemy isolate you in your unanswered prayers. Join hands, join hearts, and keep praying on. Because even when you feel unheard, you are being held, and the act of prayer itself is transforming you into a vessel more capable of receiving whatever perfect gift God has prepared in His perfect time. The seed of faith is often watered by the tears shed in persistent prayer, even when the harvest seems impossibly far away. You sit in the quiet ache of not yet. The calendar pages turn, but the desired change remains just over the horizon, a shimmering mirage in the desert of your waiting. This season, this in-between place, feels like spiritual limbo. You prayed with fervor, poured out your heart, listed the reasons God should act now. And still, the silence stretches, punctuated only by the whispers of your own doubt and disappointment. Your mind, a relentless surveyor of lack, tallies the things missing, the doors still closed, the progress stalled. It's easy, almost natural, to fixate on the emptiness where hope was supposed to flourish, to let the delay become the dominant narrative of your life. You feel the drag of weariness, the slow erosion of patience, the subtle creep of bitterness, threatening to take root in the barren ground of unmet expectations. Choosing gratitude here feels like a betrayal of your reality, How can you give thanks when the very thing you yearn for is absent? When the problem looms large and intractable? When the scarcity seems overwhelming? But this is precisely where faith finds its most profound expression. Cultivating a heart of gratitude in this wilderness isn't about pretending the difficulty doesn't exist. It's about asserting the truth of God's goodness despite the difficulty. It's a radical act of faith, a spiritual declaration that says, even when I don't understand, even when I hurt, I see your hand in the small things. This conscious choice begins the slow, steady work of shifting your perspective, not from the problem itself, but from the scarcity you perceive to the provision God has already given. Consider the breath filling your lungs right now. It's a gift. The sun rising, painting the sky in hues of impossible beauty. A gift. The simple meal that sustains you, a roof offering shelter, a kind word spoken or received. These are not trivialities when seen through the lens of grace. They are tangible evidences of God's ongoing care, manna for the journey, sustenance in the desert. Even the fact that God is with you in the waiting, His presence a quiet anchor in the storm of uncertainty, is perhaps the greatest gift of all. Giving thanks for these foundational mercies doesn't diminish the pain or frustration of your specific situation. It doesn't magic away the limbo, but it does something equally powerful. It enlarges your view of God's grace, revealing that His favor is not contingent on your circumstances aligning with your timeline. His goodness endures, whether the answer is yes, no, or wait. Gratitude in this context is not just a feeling. It's a potent spiritual weapon against the despair that waiting so often brings. Despair thrives in the darkness of focused lack, whispering that you are forgotten, that nothing will change, that the problem is bigger than God. Gratitude shines a light on the places God is moving, the ways He is providing, the truths about His character that remain unwavering regardless of external circumstances. It reminds you that God's faithfulness is an attribute of Him, not a consequence of your situation improving immediately. It's a truth that stands firm when the world feels like shifting sand. When the ancient Israelites wandered, they received daily bread, a constant reminder of God's provision even in their prolonged limbo. Their journey wasn't easy, marked by impatience and doubt, but God's faithfulness in the small things, the manna, the water from the rock, was unwavering. Perhaps the hardest part is believing that these small things matter when the big thing feels so overwhelming. But God often works in quiet, incremental ways, building resilience and faith through daily mercies before revealing the larger plan. Gratitude trains your spiritual eyes to see His fingerprints everywhere, not just in the dramatic breakthroughs. It's a discipline that rewires your focus from the barrenness of the wilderness to the unexpected springs God provides along the way. It transforms the waiting room from a place of dread into a sanctuary where you can recognize God's enduring goodness, even in the midst of your deepest uncertainty. Choose today to give thanks for the breath in your lungs, the light of the sun, the quiet beating of your own heart. Simple gifts that testify to a God who is present, who is good, and whose faithfulness endures long after your patience has run thin. This simple act is a powerful declaration of trust in the author of your story. Even when you can't see the next page, you trace the rough, knotted texture beneath your fingers. This is what your life feels like right now. A jumble of loose ends, sudden snags, colors that clash and make no sense together. From where you sit, looking up from the underside, it's just chaos. A mess of waiting, confusion, unanswered questions, and hopes that seem tangled beyond repair. It looks nothing like the beautiful design you imagined, prayed for, or felt was promised. You wonder, how could anything good, anything purposeful, come from this tangled knot? But you are only seeing the underside. Imagine, for a moment, leaning back, stepping away, and seeing your life from the perspective of the master weaver. He isn't looking at the tangled knots. He is looking at the glorious, intricate pattern unfolding on the top side. The knots you see, the delays, the detours, the painful snags, these are not mistakes. From his vantage point, they are crucial anchors, adding depth, strength, and necessary structure to the final design. He doesn't just see this moment. He sees the sweep of time, the interconnectedness of lives, the ripple effect of every thread pulled and placed. Your season of waiting, which feels like a frustrating, motionless pause on the underside, is often his time of crucial weaving on the top. He is orchestrating events you don't know about, preparing hearts you haven't met, allowing lessons to settle deep within you that are essential for the strength of the final fabric. He is protecting you from snags and tears you wouldn't survive, adding threads of resilience and faith that can only be forged in the quiet, unseen process of waiting. He sees the finished masterpiece, not just your current, limited view. His hands are skilled beyond measure. His vision is perfect love, and his timing isn't about delay. It's about adding the exact color, texture, and tension needed for the pattern to emerge in full glory. Perhaps the greatest clarity you gain in this season isn't from understanding the knots, but from trusting the perfect hand that is weaving them. True strength is found not in forcing the pattern, but in surrendering to the weaver's process. So, what does it mean to trust the master weaver when all you see is the tangle? It means releasing the need to understand every knot. It means believing, with a faith that whispers in the chaos, that the God who began this work is perfectly capable of completing it. It means resting in the assurance that even the most confusing, painful threads are being woven into a design that will ultimately bring him glory and reflect his beauty. Look away from the tangled underside for a moment. Gaze in faith toward the unseen topside, knowing that the master weaver is creating something breathtakingly beautiful, and your life, in all its perceived messiness, is a cherished part of his magnificent, timeless design. Trust his skill. Trust his love. Trust the timing woven into the tapestry. You have walked through this season of waiting, perhaps longer and more painfully than you ever imagined. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months, and the silence pressed in. You wrestled with doubt, feeling its cold fingers tighten around your heart. Disappointment was a bitter taste you became all too familiar with, and you longed for clarity, for breakthrough, for an end to the uncertainty that shadowed your steps. The world kept moving, but you felt suspended, held in a liminal space where prayers seemed to echo back unanswered. You questioned everything: your faith, your worthiness, even the goodness of God himself. The wilderness felt vast and lonely, and the hope you clung to sometimes felt as small and fragile as a mustard seed tossed in the wind. You sat by the window, watching the rain fall, wondering if the heavens were weeping with you, or if they were simply indifferent to your plight. But pause now. Look back for a moment at the path you have just traversed. How have you changed in this season? What has this prolonged moment of stillness carved into the contours of your soul? How has your faith, stripped bare of expectation and urgency, deepened into something more resilient, more grounded? What have you learned about your own perceived strength, perhaps how quickly it faltered? Or more importantly, what have you learned about the unfailing strength of the God who, against all evidence your feelings presented, sustained you through every trembling step? It was in the quiet that you learned the truest lessons. It was in the waiting that you were most actively being worked upon. Even in the silence, even in the delay that felt like abandonment, His presence has been with you. He did not leave your side, not for a single moment. The waiting was not a void, an empty space where nothing happened. It was, in fact, a sacred space, a holy pause. It was here, in the unseen, in the unhurried rhythm of His divine timing, that He was shaping you, refining you like precious metal in the fire. He was teaching you lessons the next chapter could never impart. He was loving you fiercely, tenderly, persistently, molding you into the person He created you to be, stronger, deeper, more surrendered. Rest now in the assurance that His work in you, begun in secret, is good and profoundly complete for this season. The future is still held securely in His hands, hands marked by sacrifice, hands that guide the galaxies. He is utterly faithful, even when your circumstances felt utterly faithless. You are not forgotten. You are held fast in His unwavering grip. And even when you could not hear it with your ears, straining for an audible word or a clear sign, His presence was singing, a song of profound love, of unwavering faithfulness, a melody woven with promises older than time itself. He sang this song over your waiting soul, over your doubt-filled heart, over your weary spirit. This divine serenade wasn't just comfort, it was preparation. He was singing the next chapter into existence over you, preparing the ground, preparing your heart, preparing you for the unfolding story He is already writing. He turns the hidden season into a holy story. The promise wasn't just the destination, it was the journey. Walked with Him through the valley towards the light. This is the timeless truth that anchors the storm. God's love is not contingent on your circumstances changing quickly, or even changing in the way you hoped. His faithfulness isn't measured by immediate answers, but by His eternal character. To walk in trust, not sight, in seasons like this, means acknowledging the ache, the disappointment, the fear, the very real-world anxieties, but choosing, moment by moment, to believe the unseen author is still writing a masterpiece. It means trusting that even when the lamp feels dim and the path uncertain, the oil provider is present, ensuring the light, though faint, is enough for the next step. They didn't see the end of the story in the middle of their trial, the parting of the sea, the quenching of the thirst, the victory on the other side of the battle. But they trusted the author, and that was enough.